What is up, YouTube? Enforcer5150 here, and I just want to first say I hope you're all having an amazing holiday weekend or holiday week, 2 weeks, whatever you got. Anyway, what we're doing today is we're gonna, give that Shadow Tech a little bit of a review here, and I've been talking about it for almost a month. I've been trying to figure out the way to put this all together for a while. If you don't know what Shadow is, it's basically hardware that you can rent. I just want to start out by saying, if you know anything about server administration or something like that, you'll notice that this is basically kind of like a remote desktop to a dedicated server, like a Windows dedicated server. But what you're able to get is access to the hardware, such as the graphics card and stuff like that, so that you can actually play games on it. And one of the main things is they found a way to have their own custom software that will bring down the latency like really low to where it's just like having the computer there with you. Anyway, they have a lot of claims in here, and that's why I kind of wanted to do this video. Linus Tech Tips did a lot of stuff about how you can move it onto different platforms and stuff like that. You can put it on your laptop, you can just put it on everything. And if you haven't seen Linus's video on this, I highly recommend heading over to Linus Tech Tips and looking for the video that says the end of gaming hardware. It's definitely worth watching to see what this thing can do. That's just one of the things that, that's the technology that it is amazing. But what we're going to look at today is actually the performance. We're going to look at some gameplay, and we're going to see, exactly how the performance is, what it can actually do. Is it being a high-end machine? And I got to say that, saying that it's a high-end gaming machine is relative, because it's kind of like one person's high-end machine is not another person's high-end machine. My friend, Raven420, which I had a lot of help here with, we did a lot of the tests comparing to his system, because that used to be my high-end machine. It has a 980 Ti, it has a i7 4790K, and it's actually running DDR3. This Shadow runs DDR4, but also has a few things that you would consider more new, but also a CPU that is older, like an E3 or E5, I believe it is. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the stuff here. So what we're starting out with is you see that it has a Quadro P5000, which really isn't a gaming graphics card. It's obviously for like rendering and stuff like that. One thing I like here is that the temperature is always low, so you're always getting your peak performance, and you're keeping everything low because it's probably in a data center. So you have to imagine it's going to be very cool in there and everything else. Now for the CPU, we have a Intel Xeon E5-2680 running at 2.5 gigahertz. Now that's an older type of CPU, but it is a version 3, so it's probably a little bit newer and updated. It's more of a server CPU than like a gaming CPU or anything like that. Same with the Quattro that's on there. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and do some not benchmarks, but we're just gonna do some performance reviews of some of the stuff that Raven420 and myself, we did some gaming and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Like, I know the game shows that it's running 115 frames per second right now. 20.
Mine's 95. 94, 95, 96-ish. And I'm moving around, like back and forth, up and down, jumping. 92, 91. It hit some 80s, but that's with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. So you can see there that both of these are really close to being the same. You're getting like 100 versus about 95, so you're within like 10 frames per second when you're going from his 980 to the P5000 with the E5. And really, I mean, that's not a big difference. Now the cost comparison, the actual hardware that you're getting with the Shadow is definitely a little bit higher end and more expensive, but as far as like gaming performance, it's not really that far up. And now I chose to use Raven420's system because that's the system I had before. And when I started messing with the Shadow Tech, I noticed the frames were really consistent with my old hardware, which is the 980 Ti, the i7 4790K. And I was like, okay, well, I want to see exactly how close these really are. And as that used to be a high-end computer or a high-end gaming system, it still kind of is. So that's why I say it's kind of relative. It depends on who you are. It's still an expensive system. The Shadow Tech, obviously, does a little bit better. But you're paying $35 a month for this hardware. Now you may be wondering why I didn't go ahead and use one of my own systems. Like, this is my 1080 Ti with the 2700X, and you can see that there's really no comparison in between the two. Right now I have a lot of stuff running in the background. This is just a game that Raven and I was just playing, and I had Adobe Premiere open, I had Photoshop open, and I had websites and everything else. So this wasn't just just doing this part for performance, but that's pretty much why, because I'm basically always getting way more than I would with the Shadow Tech. Now they do upgrade the hardware. Now if they upgraded it a little bit more than where they're at, it definitely could have the potential to rise up to one of these higher end machines, like my 2080, my RTX 2080, or this one with the i9, or with the 2700X. But where it stands right now, it's really more closer to like 1060, 1070, because that's kind of where the 980 Ti falls in. Now we ran a little bit here with PUBG. We actually had some problems with it. I had to switch a few things to low. The filtering, the shadows, and the foliage. Raven had a few problems having the main thing running, Rivet Tuner, and it just kept on crashing his system. So we had to just do a few things, but it did run it a little bit better in some spots. But my results here were kind of inconclusive because I changed my settings in between, so my frames really didn't change. As you can see on his, he was getting like 113 or 100 to 113 frames per second, where I was only getting around 90 and stuff like that. Here is Raven with the 980 Ti running everything at max, and you can kind of see there in the corner. Sorry, that's a kind of small. We ran this one. This was just us playing randomly, which he gets about 60. He stayed over 60, but he ran 60 to around 80-85 frames per second, and it wasn't too bad. Here is the Shadow Tech in that same game, and you can see that I'm getting pretty much the same frames that he kind of was, and I have Afterburner running, and I did check this, that Afterburner running versus Afterburner being completely off, I get the same frames per second. It doesn't really change anything with the performance, which I've heard a few claims of it bringing down your frames per second, and it really hasn't for me. The only time I have seen frames go down is when you turn on NVIDIA's recording. You'll lose about 3 frames per second. OBS, sometimes you'll lose 5, sometimes less. It depends on how you have it set up. But anyway, as you can see, I do get fluctuating results with the Shadow Tech, and that's the one thing that bothered me with it, is that it wasn't staying at 60 or above 60. It kind of kept on jumping down, and this is at 1080p with everything maxed out, 100% maxed out. So that kind of bothered me. Now here it was even worse. I went and ran it at 1440p. This is No Man's Sky. I have everything maxed out and 1440p. I mean, basically from the claims, you should be able to run, most games. I figured I'd try something that's non-competitive type game. At first, I thought it was like, okay, this may work well. But as I started moving around, I noticed that the frames started really dropping down. Like, I kept on getting down to, 30s and upper 20s, like 29 even. And it really wasn't playable, I would say. And like, you can play it, but it's definitely not, it's just not stable. In 1080p, it was still fluctuating a lot, but you would get more frames per second, which is good, but running down to 30 frames per second when you want to try to stay over 60, it kind of ruins the game for me. That, you know, kind of a personal take on my end. Games like this that are like console type based games, which I call it, I don't really mind, you know, being at like, you know, 30 or 40 frames, 45 frames per second, as long as it's stable at that amount. But when it starts jumping down from 1 frame per second to another, that's where I start, you know, it messes with your eyes, you know, and it makes the gameplay not as enjoyable. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at some other results. What I did here is ran cinebench R15 just to kind of see what we would actually get. On the Shadow Tech, we got 100 frames per second, an OpenGL, and then the CPU we got 644. And then we put this against my i9 9900K, which definitely blew it out of the water with the CPU at 1974 cinebench score, but the OpenGL is only 25 frames per second more. Which is more going off of like kind of the graphics end of everything. Really, I would say that there's not too much difference between the two, but with that CPU score, when you add that into, you know, the OpenGL like you've seen with Overwatch, you know, you got a lot more frames per second. You know, you're looking more than, you know, 25. You're looking at more like 40. I mean, that's a pretty significant amount of frames per second to jump up by when you're playing a competitive type game anyway. Now, I guess the main question here is, you know, is this the end of gaming hardware? That's what Linus's video was titled, and no, I have to say no, it's definitely not. Renting hardware is a good thing, but now if we take into consideration that you're paying $35 a month for this, which is a good thing, and I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna recommend this for, say, like someone that's in school, you know, say even in high school or something like that, and they can't afford a high-end machine. They can't get anything that can play anything more than, you know, 720p or 1080p on low settings. Then definitely this is, you know, kind of a stepping stone to getting into gaming, into PC gaming and stuff like that. But when you look at the prices in the long range, you're doing, you know, $35 a month, and then you take that over a year, you're paying $420 a year if you keep it for a year. I think they do have deals if you pay for the entire year up front. So if you went that route, it's a little bit better. But if you look at say like Raven's system, which was, you know, 980 Ti, you know, that system I had since it first came out, and that's about 2015. I think it was June or July of 2015 that I ended up getting that, and it was around $600 on sale or something like that. Yeah, actually it was just under $600, I remember now. And that was, I mean, that's just for the graphics card. But if you're looking at a card like that, it's a 5-year card that's, you know, pretty much expected to be able to play, you know, decent frame rates and stuff like that for 5 years. And here it is in 2018, which is still doing really well in almost every modern game. And I think a total I paid on that system was about $1,200, and that was with everything: motherboard, RAM, the CPU, the 4790K, just everything, and it cost me actually less than. Actually, it was around $1,100. Sorry, I had that wrong. It was about $1,100. Let's just stick at that. But now, if you look at that, and you look at it being a 5-year card in a 5-year system, 5 years with this is going to run you about $2,100. So if you're paying month to month, you're paying about $2,100. So if you go with, say, the 12-month deals, let me actually double check that. So I noticed that on the Shadow website that they actually don't have the yearly cycle anymore on there. I don't know if they took it off of there, or if it's just maybe it was a deal that they were doing at the time. So maybe you want to keep an eye out to see if that comes back at any time soon. Anyway, this brings me to my final conclusion of the ShadowTech hardware. Is it the end of gaming hardware? I'm going to have to say no, it's not. People are always going to want to have their hardware, in front of them. They can resell and have in front of them and have RGB and whatever they want it to look like to kind of show off to their friends or show off in their streams or anything else like that. And then on the other hand, do I recommend this? ShadowTech. Yes, I do actually. For people that are, just trying to save up for a system or something like that, you're just paying $35 a month, and then you can save a little bit on top of that, and say get just your CPU, save just for your CPU, just for this or that, and then by the time you get everything saved up, you have a computer that you're using at the same time. So then, in that essence, I'm going to say yes, definitely, I would recommend it. I'm not going to put any type of promotion codes or anything like that, because I want this to be a completely unbiased review that I'm doing here. Anyway, that's all I'm going to do for this episode, and that will conclude my last video of 2018. So I hope you all had an amazing holiday weekend, week, 2 weeks, whatever you got off of work, school, or whatever, and you got to reconnect with those family, friends, and everything else, even the ones that you really don't want to see, but you have to on, those holiday occasions. So that leaves me with the last thing to say for this year, and that is, take care and happy gaming.